Well, let's get it going.
So we're here to help.
Oh, you guys, ooh.
We're all
If we
going to
can.
participate.
A jingle, jangle, jangle. Yeah.
What you got for
Yeah,
us?
IMO. Ah.
Yeah, this is IMO.
IMO. Michelle and Craig Show. IMO. Michelle and Craig Show.
Yeah.
Ow!
This episode is brought to you by Theraflu.
How are you?
I'm good, Craig Robinson.
Exciting day today.
Yeah. I want to sort of get right into this day because
Yeah.
we've got two guests today.
And you know these two, and I'm
I
just
know
getting
these
to
two.
know them. So
Dear friends, we've gotten to know them, worked as people might know that we were co-producers of American Symphony.
wonderful piece of work. And I'm not just saying that because I'm related to you, but
Talk about two creative forces in so many different ways. I want to hear about how they met, and
yes.
so I'm really excited. But Craig, you are always in charge of doing the proper
Yes,
introduction.
I am going to do a proper introduction. So Suleikha Jaouad is a writer, artist, and author of the New York Times best-selling memoirs, The Book of Alchemy, A Creative Practice for an Inspired Life, and Between Two Kingdoms. She writes the #1 literature newsletter on Substack, the Isolation Journals, and in November of 2025, she released the Alchemy Journal, a companion piece to the Book of Alchemy. Along with husband Jon Batiste, Suleikha is the subject of the Oscar-nominated and Grammy Award-winning documentary American Symphony. And Jon Batiste is a 7-time Grammy Academy Award, and Emmy Award-winning singer, songwriter, and composer. His 9th studio album, Big Money, is nominated for 3 2026 Grammy Awards,
Just keeps racking them up.
including Best Americana Album. In 2021, Batiste released We Are, an album that carried 9 Grammy nominations and 5 wins, including Album of the Year. Batiste's accolades also include an Academy Award for Pixar's Soul and 7-year tenure as band leader and musical director of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. So without further ado, let's
Jon.
introduce Jon and Suleikha.
Come on out.
Come on out.
Welcome to IMO, my dear friends. How are you, babe? Thank you for being here. You guys settle in.
Oh,
Can you squeeze
Cozy
in
on
there?
in.
we've been looking forward to this.
Yeah,
All the
me
way,
as
all
well.
the way.
Thank you guys.
No, I
Thank
wanted to
you for being here.
put this. I didn't know if I should put this in the official bio, but also fellow Princeton grad.
Well, yeah.
That's right.
Suleikha is like a legend on the campus when we went over there.
Mm.
You graduated top of your class. You showed them a thing or two.
Yeah.
It's I think we both grew up in households where education was the priority.
Right.
But we also had these musical paths. And so for me, I actually did not graduate from high school. I thought I was going to be a musician. Ended up realizing very quickly that path was not for me.
What was it
And
about that path that made you realize quickly?
So the deal with my parents was that I could drop out of high school to go to pre-college Juilliard, where we both went. And I had to take at least 2 days worth of college classes at the nearby campus in my hometown.
Okay.
And for the first time in my life, I had the freedom to study anything I wanted. And so I was taking classes like women in literature and a class on Nabokov and modern dance. And I realized how much I loved the expansiveness of just being able to leaf through a course catalog and get to just imagine all the possibilities. And that music, as much as I loved it, felt narrow. And as a bass player and a classical musician, there wasn't a lot of opportunity there for me. So that's how I ended up making that change, and I'm glad for it.
Can you talk about your childhood growing up? You have an interesting, eclectic, diverse, multicultural experience. Can you talk a bit more about it?
Yeah, so I'm first generation American. My dad is Tunisian. My mom is Swiss. We grew up moving around quite a bit until the age of 12 and settled in a small town in upstate New York.
What was the reason for the moves?
I think they were both trying to kind of find their place. All of our family is in Switzerland and Tunisia, but the job opportunity for my dad, who was a college professor, was here in the US. Okay. And so I think like a lot of kids who grow up first generation in an immigrant household, there's the culture you live in at home, and then there's the culture outside of school. So I remember on the first day of kindergarten and showing up and not speaking a word of English and feeling very much like an outsider. My brother was in ESL and English as a second language, and he came home from school one day and said to my mom, I'm the dumbest kid in my class. And she said, you're not dumb, you just don't know the language yet. And so as beautiful and enriching as it was to have this multicultural interfaith household, I think as a little kid, all you want is to be normal. You want to fit in. And so it took me a long time to embrace that feeling of being a misfit. But John and I actually met in that town upstate when we were about 12, 13 years old.
This is the band camp, right?
At the band camp, the infamous band camp.
How did you wind up at the band camp,
in
John?
Upstate New York.
Saratoga Springs.
That's up there.
Saratoga Springs is not New Orleans, Louisiana.
That's right.
I'm telling you. It was... I remember going there, and I saw Suleika wearing Birkenstocks. That was the first time I saw somebody wearing Birkenstocks.
A 12-year-old.
It was, dang, this is like very granola, hippie vibe.
So, yeah, I heard about this.
Right. I heard about this vibe. Interesting. But it was Don McCormick, a family friend of ours, and now it's just somebody so special in our life. But at the time, he was the guy who would come to our high school and scout who's the next one. New Orleans always produces these great musicians. Who's the young kid that we should look out for? And he came down one summer. I was in 9th or 10th grade, and he came to the class, and they pointed to me, and I was too afraid to play. Because I was very shy as a kid. Even up in the high school, I didn't like to be. That's a whole nother conversation. But
we'll get there.
When we got to the time to play, I said, no, I don't know. So he couldn't pick me because he didn't hear me. And he went, picked somebody else from the class or somebody in the neighborhood. And he came back the next summer and he said, nah, I've been hearing about you for a year. You got to play. You just got to play for me. And I played for him, and then I get accepted to this camp. It's the first time I'm leaving home, seeing something for myself without the influence of my parents or my big sister or my cousins or whatever.
Right.
It was life-changing. Camp is a deep, this is a veiled advertisement for band camp. Everybody. You meet your person, and you see the world.
Pretty girl in Birkenstocks.
I'm saying everybody loves Suleika. From the first everybody to camp.
But no sparks there. You just met.
Well, you all were 12.
Yeah, we
I was
kids.
12, John was 13, 14. Yeah, no sparks.
No.
You were too shy, really, to talk to me.
Was this band camp? Was band camp sleepaway? To talk about, were there bunks? Were there bathrooms? Were you all just carrying around your cellos, or did you swim?
Were there bathrooms?
Were there
What do you mean, were there bathrooms?
Well, no, a lot of times they don't. You got an outhouse situation, right?
Wait, what year is this? Like, you think this is 1940?
What is your bathrooms? Was it a camping experience, or were you at a school on a college?
It's true.
And then there's
It was sleepaway, but we were in the dorms.
okay.
It was
all right.
like
okay, you were
There
in
got to be
dorms.
some place for the instruments.
Well, I don't know. They might have them dusted out by the campfire. I don't know. That's
But
why
it
I'm trying to
kinda
get
was
a
like
feel
that.
for
She
that.
really did graduate from Princeton. She really did.
No, you're wrong. You're wrong, Greg. Oh my goodness. For me, it kind of was like that, though. It was kind of like the boonies because
Okay.
Well, so there was a jazz camp, which John was in. There was an orchestra camp, which I went to, and a
got
ballet
it.
camp.
Got it.
I got it. So this
Oh,
was
okay.
a college camp, not
It
like
was a college
sleepaway
campus.
camp
Sleep in the
that-
dorms, no outhouses.
no.
But I remember John was so shy that I really don't think we spoke to each other. We met.
Because was he talking to anybody?
No.
Did you just
No.
came? What were you doing? What did you think when you got? Did you get dropped off, or were you just given a ticket?
I've been working. I've been working in the last. We've been talking about this for some years, but I've been working actively to remember the first 15 years of my life because it's all a blur.
Why is that?
I remember certain things, but I think I was doing some processing,
Right,
some observing,
right.
some processing, checking out what's happening, and trying to understand how to engage with the world and engage with my talents and engage with all the things that it felt like every other week I was evolving into something that I didn't even quite know where it was going. So I was trying to figure that out. But what was your... Suleika, on the other hand, was always...
Yeah, she was always her. This
But you
fabulous
see-
specimen here.
It's unbelievable. Just always so eloquent and charismatic. I remember she was going through the woods with the Birkenstocks and the bass. And
On my way to the outhouse.
Okay, you guys.
no,
It's not funny anymore.
no.
But what I remember about John, he really was in his own world. But that end of summer recital, John played a solo, and it was like the entire audience took in a collective inhale. It was, you'd been playing piano for a year or two at that point, not very long, 2 years.
Yeah, when I started at the...
Wow.
Whoa. So what did you have to play in order for him to hear you? Were you playing a different instrument or were you just playing the piano?
You'd been playing piano for a year the first time he came, maybe.
Yeah. So I started going to the New Orleans Center for the Creative Arts. Great. A lot of relatives went there, a lot of the great musicians, jazz particularly. So when I started going to NOCA, I was about a year into me playing the piano. So by the time I was at the camp, I was maybe 2 years in. I started playing piano. I was 11 or 12 years old, so about 13, 14. I had been playing for about a year or two. And yeah.
Self-taught or sort of family
Well, you come
osmosis?
from royalty, New Orleans music royalty. They were pretty solid in music.
Listen, there was a lot of musicians growing up. There's a lot. We were hearing, my dad was my first musical mentor, but it's actually my mom who, she has a clairvoyance to her. She has a deeply dedicated, intelligent woman.
Okay.
But I remember when we were kids, she would always come home with a new offering of tutelage for us to partake in. Lessons, tennis lessons, gymnastics, coding. You can go to this chess camp. But you are a piano player, and I'm going to take you to these lessons every Saturday morning. And if you like it, we can continue.
How did she know you were a piano player? That was the clairvoyance.
That's
in
the-
her. Got it. Yeah.
She saw it.
What
But-
was it like with your siblings?
I mean, Suleika is the older sister, and
Yeah.
I'm the younger brother.
I was going to say it's the great gift and burden of being the eldest.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
sense of responsibility.
Yes.
Yes. But it was definitely a reverse of the dynamic. We went to At the time, there was corporal punishment in our school.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one time there was a thing that something happened in the class where I got caught up in, there was a class clown who was my best friend, Keon. And Keon he would dance like Michael Jackson behind the teacher's back. And he would get to a thing. It would be amazing. But then when the teacher turned around, he would always be back in his seat.
Yeah.
And he was doing that once, and he got me to get up and do it.
Oh.
And I did it, and we got caught. So then they sent us to another class where they didn't have a board handy, I guess, for the paddle that we were about to get. So we went to my sister's class. Oh. And she was sitting there. And as soon as she saw me walking, she was like, "What are you doing in my class?" And then they lined us up, and her teacher gave us the whack. And I was like, I knew she was going to go home and say, "You'll never guess what happened at school today."
Guess who I saw?
Guess who I... but
Little Nancy Wilson.
Yeah.
Guess who I saw?
Oh,
It was you.
Yeah.
Getting your ass whooped.
We reported on each other.
So this is also a thing about younger, older siblings. You didn't have to talk because other people were talking for you. That may be part of it. I don't know if you found that, Suleikha, with your siblings. You had the poise. Did you find that your brother just sort of laid in the cut, as we called it, because Suleikha's going to figure it out and I'll just observe?
This episode is brought to you by Theraflu, makers of fast-acting cold and flu relief. Since 2021, Theraflu's Rest and Recover Fund has provided more than $1 million to families to help offset the cost of a sick day. We had IMO listeners share stories about how paid sick time has impacted their lives and wanted to share a few of them with you. Many of our listeners are a part of the sandwich generation, meaning they are responsible for taking care of their kids and also their parents or in-laws. We had one listener share that they have had to take sick time for their own recovery and then also simultaneously care for their grandmother, which made it hard for them to fully rest and get better. I think this is something we both can relate to with caring for our mom, and even now for me, that my in-laws are living close by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, but I'd say that we are way more blessed than our mom was because we had resources. I mean, this is, I think, what Theraflu understands. I mean, being a part of the sandwich generation when you don't have the resources and support means something totally different. We saw that with our mom because, as many of you know, we lived in our home with our great aunt and great uncle as they aged. And our mother was in that sandwich position where we saw her caring for our aunt and uncle as they aged while we were still pretty young. And I just remember those times with her being so exhausted, not just physically exhausted, but just exhausted by the worry of all what turned out to be 24-hour care. It's too much for a generation to bear. But thanks to Theraflu and their work, there's support out there.
And there's another listener who shared that she is a single mom who doesn't have paid sick time. She said that she has no choice but to work when sick because she can't afford not to.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Theraflu knows that resting and recovering when sick can be especially difficult for parents and caregivers who aren't just responsible for themselves, but also the loved ones they care for. That's why Theraflu remains committed to continuing to fight for paid sick leave for all Americans, because no one should have to choose between their health and their job. Learn more or help someone apply for the fund at theraflu.com/right to recover.
You know, in a weird way, I've felt that way on behalf of my whole family. I felt like the translator of what, this American culture that we were trying to assimilate into.
Yeah.
And I felt this maybe outsized sense of responsibility to get everybody on board, as if assimilation was some kind of family project that was
Right.
going to ensure our safety. So I felt terrible about it now, but my mom, would mispronounce a word and I'd immediately correct her. Or I remember she's probably the most thoughtful person I know, but she would make us these beautiful lunches. And she'd write a little note on the napkin, and I'd get to school and I would immediately put it to the side and put it in the trash, because I knew I was going to be made fun of for our chicken tagine and couscous or whatever it was that we had for lunch that day. And with my brother, he was so shy. He got bullied a lot in school. I felt really protective of him. So I do think in some ways, that there's truth to some of the things we associate with birth order.
But also the first generation piece of it all, which, as us American kids growing up in America, as Black kids, we had our own assimilation going on. But you make a wonderful point that you're trying to help your parents who don't know the culture. They don't speak the language perfectly. And you're taking on an outsized responsibility to make sure that they don't stumble or fall or get hurt or get made fun of. And you're just a child yourself in that process.
I remember keeping lists of vocabulary words that I would learn at school, like American idioms, and I'd write them down, memorize them, practice them until they sounded somewhat natural in conversation. I found one the other day and it said, talk to the hand.
Oh, yeah, that's
L
a good one.
on forward means loser. And it was like a whole cheat.
Wow.
A little,
Crib
crib
notes
notes.
for myself.
Yes.
Exactly.
It's like this talk to the hand.
Yeah.
Talk to the
Now,
hand.
how would you explain that to your mother?
Probably, yeah. I don't know if I was explaining it to her, but.
And would be like, huh?
And the thing I appreciate so much, and we were both raised by such strong women who I think were really unique, to have an example of someone who didn't really care what other people thought.
Yeah.
My mom would come and pick us up at the bus stop on cross-country skis wearing a backwards baseball cap, which,
And you guys were just like, I don't know her.
I don't know her. Please never do this again. And now I just think that's the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah.
That's neat. Serious, making it happen. Come on, living just enough for the city.
There you go. There you go.
Yes, making it happen,
So when, for each of you, do you think, as in your youth, did you break out? When did you feel like, I got this? I'm no longer the misfit.
I had a really, right before I met you, 12, I went to the movie theater with my mom and I saw this movie, Julia Roberts. It's called
Julia Roberts playing
Mona Lisa Smile.
Oh,
right?
okay.
And all the girls on the first day of class had already read the textbooks, and they were beautiful and fashionable and cool. And more than anything, they led with their intelligence. And I went home, and that was one of those light bulb moments you can have as a little kid. And the next day, I'd been hanging out with these sort of cool kids in my grade who, were in fact, now looking back, not very cool, kind of mixed up in the wrong things. And I walked straight past them in the cafeteria. And I went to the library and I found this girl in my class who lived down the block from us, who was top of our class. And I said, can you teach me how to study? Wow. And I, every day from that point forward during lunch, sat with this new friend and realized, being smart is actually the coolest thing that I can do. Maybe not for current me, in the school setting that we were in, but for future me. And that's going to be my path forward.
Yeah, I remember the way that you, in that time when we met, felt like the world was open. It was a wide open. You could feel that. For me, I love the title of your book because for me, it really resonates with coming out of my shell or not really having one moment, but a becoming, a sequence of 1,000 decisions that culminate into this moment, and then 1,000 more from this moment forward to the next moment. And ultimately at the center of it, a strong intention to do something that's bigger than yourself and to create something that's resonant for people in a way that's profound and is the highest manifestation of your gifts, and moving through the world to the point where I remember the years just before I started doing the Late Show. There was some of the best years of freedom and expression and the possibility of what things could be. We'd started dating at that time too, in our early, mid-20s. There was a period where we felt, we weren't making no money, but we felt like we were on top of the world. And I think that might be the moment, I guess, but there's no moment I can't pinpoint.
Yeah, I understand.
John, in American Symphony, which was a beautiful, beautiful story, the two of you. But you said something that really struck with me, and I think I knew what you meant, but I'd love to hear from you. You said music is inevitable. And I mean, that show choked me up, the whole thing. Tell me what you meant by that. Because I think I know what you meant. Well, I should say I know what it means to me.
Yes.
But I want to hear what you meant when you said that.
There's a power to what we do. It comes from the divine stream of consciousness where all creative comes from, and we're the vessel of the creative. We put it out into the world. And when we're true to that, there's a purity to that connection. There's a purity to the expression. And each note and the next note and the next note and the next note that comes, it's inevitable. It's the only thing that could have happened. Because we've not tried to change it or manipulate it for personal gain or to commodify it for efficiency and scale. We've not tried to lie. When we hear music, that's why we love it. Because it's inevitable. It feels like life. It feels like divine alignment. And that's my belief of with the symphony, but any music that I partake in, I try to make it tuned into that pure source.
Now you too, Suleikha, dealt with a little pushback and redefining yourself. Talk a bit about that transition for you.
Yeah, I think when you're a kid, there's this notion of a coming of age arc. And when you get to the end of that arc, you'll have answers and certainty about who you are. And I'm now of the opinion that life is just a series of coming of age arcs. There's no there where you get to a place and you're like, this is who I am. Yep. This is what I'm doing. And if you can surrender to that and enjoy the process of discovery, then it becomes exciting and interesting. So I had a lot of those. When I graduated, I wanted to be a war correspondent. And about a year after graduation, ended up in the hospital, and I was diagnosed with leukemia, and I stayed in that hospital. That first year, I think I spent about 8 months as an inpatient. And those moments where maybe you've invested everything into something and it doesn't pan out for reasons that may or may not be beyond your control can obviously, leave you feeling defeated. And for me, especially at 22, when you're watching your friends on social media starting careers and traveling the world and getting married and all the other big and small milestones of early adulthood, it's easy to feel like you're uniquely stuck.
Yeah.
That summer, I started, for the first time in my life, not doing things from a place of self-imposed expectation or thinking about what was practical, but just trying to follow my curiosity. To be, as our friend Liz Gilbert says, 1% more curious than afraid. And I started keeping a journal in the form of a 100-day project with my friends and family. And I realized in the course of keeping that journal that I was using it like a reporter's notebook. And that while I couldn't be a war correspondent in the way that I thought, I was reporting from the front lines of my hospital bed. And so that ended up leading to a blog, like the good millennial that I was in 2011 when blogging was all the rage. And that led to my first time ever being published in the form of a weekly column. And so I think for both of us, you know, we've been the recipients of great abundance and also great heartbreak and the work of learning to surf those peaks and valleys without letting yourself get stuck in defeat has been our ongoing work. And John's been such a great inspiration to me. I mean, yeah, when we talk about being a misfit, John doesn't fit into a box. He like explodes the box and then draws a whole different shape for himself. And then he erases that and draws a new one.
When did you guys reconnect?
Oh, yes. Now we're
When
talking.
Exactly. So John was basically doing exactly that when I reconnected with him. I was 16 at that point. It's my first month at Juilliard, and I saw him on the 1 train. I had no idea that he was at Juilliard. And he was dancing and singing to himself with big old headphones on. And everyone in the subway car was staring at him. Like, what is going on with this guy?
You gotta be who you are, man.
And I turned to my friend Michelle and I said, I know that guy. That's Jon Batiste from Bandcamp. And then out of nowhere, I said, that's the man I'm going to marry someday.
Really?
I have no idea why I said it. Didn't think of it again. We reconnected.
And you hadn't thought of it prior.
Nope.
You didn't
and
walk
I didn't
out
think
of
of it after.
You
It was
didn't
like,
walk out of band camp thinking, "Ooh, that John." He
No.
said not a word, but I felt a thing.
I felt something with that one.
No, you were still in your gloriously awkward phase.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what was he wearing?
I don't remember what he was wearing that particular. I remember the headphones. I remember you
Were
were
they
in
a
your
color?
Converse sneaker era then. You were trying some things at the time. Oversized suits.
Yeah. Had 3 suits.
3 suits, that's right.
I would take drawings to a tailor, and they would be like, well, we can't make this, but we can give you the textiles to make it. So then I would buy the textiles, and then I would bring them to a tailor that I could afford to make the stuff. And then they started making suits. So I'd play shows, and I'd take some of the money from the gigs I'd take to the tailor, and I'd start making my own clothes. So I started making my own clothes and buying Converse that matched the suits.
What colors were these?
Canary
bright
yellow.
colors? Of course, I knew that it was.
Fuchsia
I knew it.
Fuchsia pink, remember that
I
one?
remember. I can.
Why
he had
did I
6
know?
suits.
It was
I remember
yellow.
all
It was
of them.
going-
One had tails on it.
Oh, yeah. Design.
like tux tails, straight up tails.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cloaks city.
Oh.
Cloaks, of
Don't
course.
sleep on a cloak.
No.
Oh.
No.
Don't sleep on
Really?
the cloak.
Because I have been sleeping on a cloak. I have been sleeping on a cloak.
There's something to it.
So you're in the subway
Yeah.
with your. Did you consider this your subway attire performance attire, or were you
Sometimes.
just going to the Dwayne's drugstore in it?
It was performance attire, but it was more than that. It
Yeah.
was a form of expressing the identity that we were discovering in the sound, in the look. And it was just how I was when I was walking around in the world. I remember I would go to vintage shops and thrift shops, and, I would put stuff together. And I started traveling, doing some performances where I discovered some tailors from different parts of the world, and they had different textiles and all kinds of stuff you could use. So that opened up a whole nother thing.
Right.
But yeah.
And what was
Subway.
the sound at the time? Was it your jazz band? Was it straight jazz, old school jazz? Was it?
I didn't have a term for it, so I made a term. I called it social music.
Social music.
And the band's name was Stay Human.
Okay, yeah.
So that was the philosophy. And it was a mix of, the idea of social music was really music from all of the different folkloric traditions of music before music was commodified. And how do you take all of those different traditions, study them, find the different dots that you can connect between them, and bring it into the 21st century. So that was my vision. I was lofty.
Yeah, sure. You still are. That's what
Yeah.
makes you beautiful.
You gotta be yourself, you see.
So you saw this happening on the subway, and you were like, that's my dude.
It was one of those things that you blurt out, don't know where it comes from, you don't think of it again. And it wasn't until our mid-20s that we really started dating. And it was such a beautiful time in our 20s. And I think, your band name, Stay Human, is really an encapsulation of what I love most about you. You were just so open and just so incredibly creative. I'll never forget the first time I went to John's apartment. It was like a sight to behold.
Oh, tell us.
There were mantras written on the ceiling and on the walls. I remember above his bed, he had written a list, and it said, pray, drink water, phone home, have fun. It was suitcases, looked like an airport terminal because he was, constantly playing shows and on the road, and would come home and not unpack and have his next
Was
suitcase.
this in New York?
In Washington Heights. Piles of books. First time I had dinner there, it started to rain, and there was a flood of water coming in through the window. And I was like, how long has this been going on for? And he was like, since I moved in. And I was like, how long ago was that? And he said, a couple years ago.
You're just letting it rain in your house.
Yeah, exactly. But you were just...
It's fine. It's just water.
Yeah.
You were just living in the world of your creativity and your determination to do what your band was called, to stay human, and to figure out what that meant.
But did he cook dinner that night?
He did
in
cook
his
dinner.
water-filled apartment?
He did. He made red beans and rice.
What did I?
You don't remember anything.
I cooked red beans and rice.
Yeah.
Was it? It wasn't good then.
Was it good?
It was.
Oh.
There's your answer.
It was interesting.
I can cook now.
He's
I
a
wasn't-
great cook. He's the cook of our family.
But I wasn't cooking
You were
back then, so
figuring
it
it
was
out.
probably not very good.
Yeah. But you were dazzled.
I was dazzled, and I was totally like befuddled by John. He was unlike anyone I'd ever met. And I remember that first week we went to a park, and John sat me down and he said, "What are your intentions?" Which nobody had ever asked me before. And we had this conversation. It was a couple hours long, where we talked about what it was that was important to us, what the terms of the relationship
Oh,
were.
I love it.
And yeah, just very like
Yes.
no games.
Right.
Yeah.
Just to get to the point.
Get to the point.
Figure it out.
And what
Yeah.
was going through your mind? Did you say Suleika? Suleika, I know you call her Suleika. Why do you say Suleika?
That's how I started saying it. And you told me you liked it. So
Yeah.
I just
It's like,
I love it.
I just
you
kept
said I like it. What were you
Suleika.
thinking
I
when
like
you
her.
saw her again?
Suleika.
Were you,
I
I like
like
her.
her.
Oh, it's like that. See, now I'll never call you anything else. But
But I was thinking that it felt monumental. Felt like that conversation was like a major turning point.
how did you guys think about building your lives together? Because by then you had been diagnosed. You understood the messiness of it all. How did you two in real time negotiate that? And how do you continue to negotiate it?
Well, I think it's in the vows. You just decide that we're in it, however it needs to be set up, and it's going to be ever evolving. You know, there's going to be a range of different realities that we can't predict. So let's exist with the commitment that we made and move however we need to move, knowing that we're not quitters. That's so you got to know that the person you're with is not going to quit.
Yeah.
And if you know that, then the logistics,
Yeah.
you sort that out.
Yeah.
Just you got to know that we're in this, and that's my true north. And I think we've figured out a few different. There's an equilibrium to having this illness and not letting it define, giving it only the attention that it deserves. It's not a defining characteristic of our life.
Yeah.
It's just, that's here. Okay, and we do what we need to do with that. But everything else is also here.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if anything, the illness is just for us a good reminder of the one certainty that we all share, which is that we are born and we will die, and we are here for a very short period of time.
Yeah.
And so I think it's changed our relationship to time in a way that I'm grateful for, and doesn't feel unique to us or to my illness, but that does change the way we move through things. Because, yeah, when you made a vow, the big shift for me is, there's no longer that question of, am I in or am I out? But if this is the person I'm going to be with, how do I move forward as productively as possible? Because we are not only sharing our lives together, but we'd like to enjoy our lives together.
Yeah.
And John, really early on in our relationship, had this idea that instead of writing in a journal and doing our individual journaling, we'd write them as letters to each other, which we do, especially when we're apart, when we're both on the road for work. And it was so interesting because there are things that would come up in these letters that would never come up in the quick phone call where you're like, how are you? How was your day?
Are they letters, texts, pen to paper, or any form of?
We've done pen to paper on the road where you take a picture of it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Or
Okay.
if in person, you write, and then we trade books, little journals. But that's letters. It's the spirit of the letter writing. So I think it has to. You write it with your hand. It's not a text.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a very different thing.
It's not a dictated note.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yes.
But like you said, having the time to the writing part of it for me, I still write. Everybody asks me, what is it? Should we still go high? I get that all the time. I get it now.
Right.
And I have to explain and re-explain that going high is about communicating with intention and strategy. That doesn't mean you don't feel the emotion, but a lot of times the emotion isn't the truth. So you exaggerate in the midst of the emotion. You always do this. You never do this. But when you write it down, you start thinking, well, always isn't actually the right word, right? Or you people, oh, that's not really what I mean, right? It's how we raise kids. Count to 10.
Yeah.
Going high is counting to 10.
Yeah.
And writing in a relationship is like counting to 10. Give yourself a moment to understand what you really feel and mean, and then have that be the source, the beginning of the conversation, right?
Yes.
Our friend Esther Perel says, what you need to say is not always what they need to hear. And sometimes, like I know for me, I don't even know what I'm thinking or feeling until I start writing it down. And it takes me, a page to get through all the emotions to actually get to the heart of the thing.
Well, that gets us also to journaling, right? Which is your project, your book. Suleikha, would you talk a little bit about what you've produced thus far?
Yeah. So I've been keeping a journal my whole life. For me, it's always been this hiding place and seeking place and finding place, and just this daily practice that I do. I know you talk about small powers. Just something I do every day. It can be for 2 minutes, 10 minutes to ground myself, to write my way back to myself. But I found that I was kind of getting bored of the sound of my own voice. And so I started to find ways to prompt myself. So this book, The Book of Alchemy, is a meditation on the art of journaling and a synthesis of this approach to journaling. And it has 100 essays and prompts. Do you journal?
So I don't journal by the typical definition of journaling. So I started my professional career in investment banking, sales, and trading. So I had to keep a diary every day of what I did. It was really transactional, if you know what I mean. And so I never really journaled my feelings about Craig Robinson.
Yeah.
And now, since my mom passed away, I keep the small little book in my backpack so that when I think of things that remind me of her or the kids do something that I try and remember, I have to write that down. Now I have something I can write it down.
I'm of the opinion that there are no rules when it comes to journaling. But I know you had a journal that you kept in your 20s during a tumultuous time.
In my teens and 20s, I had a journal, sporadic. Barack was a big journal. He has a lot of written journals. But what I did do for the White House years, because I knew that this was a unique time, that things were, I always say it's like we were shot out of a cannon. And how do you keep track of all of that? And I just literally did not have the time to put pen to paper, but I knew that I needed to capture what was going on. So what I did do was that I worked with a dear friend of mine, a law school buddy of mine who was a dean at a law school. We were very close. I trusted her, smart woman. She, a friend, would come in twice a year. And it was a way for us to catch up and stay in touch while I was First Lady. But she agreed to interview me. I needed to say out loud some of the stuff that I was feeling. And so she would come in with prompts that she had gathered watching me in the news and what was going on. And I always would have her talk to my chief of staff and schedulers just to get a sense of what literally had happened over the course of that 6-month period of time. And then we did a series of interviews that after each one, we got it transcribed. I did not read them over. But it's there. For 8 years, we collected the stories of emotions, and that material became essential when it was time to write Becoming.
Wow.
Because you know how life is when life is moving so fast. Just like you say, you don't remember any of your teens, right? And a lot of that is because you've packed so much life in.
Yes.
And that's what it was in those 8 years. I mean, I would look up and, make a comment like, "Oh, I'd love to go to Prague. It sounds wonderful." And my chief of staff would say, "You've been to Prague." I was like, "No, I haven't." I had a discussion with my staff. They were like, "You participated in a sit-in at law school." I was like, "No, I didn't." And they were like, "No, I think you did." I was like, "I absolutely have no recollection of taking over the dean of students' office and sitting in." I said, "I would have remembered that," until they showed me a picture of me. So but I had no recollection of it. And I didn't want to go through 8 years forgetting really major things.
Well, and I think so many of us are living in a state of overwhelm.
Yeah. Well, I think we're grateful for this project. And I think this is the best time in the state of the world for people to start journaling. For me right now, the journaling happens through a need to write a speech and to communicate. I find that that's when, I'm putting pen to paper. So I think I'm gonna take on one of the challenges.
I love it.
And see where it goes. As long as Craig commits to do it with me.
You know what I'm going to commit to do is the listener question.
Well, okay, we'll talk about this.
We'll talk about that
afterwards.
Post-production. This question is from Sharon.
I've lived with multiple sclerosis for 10 years, and I worry about the effect that it has on my family. I have a teen daughter who is so supportive of me, but I also am concerned that her needs might be lost in all of this. I definitely want to prioritize balancing my own health, but also carry the load for my family. For Michelle and Craig, when you were growing up, how were you affected by your dad's illness? And if you've ever been sick, how do you build in self-care? How do you prioritize what you say yes to when it comes to family, work, and everything else in life? How do you preserve yourself so that you can feel good about the days you're having with your loved ones? Sharon from Atlanta.
That's a lot there. Misha, I'll let you go first.
Well, how did Dad's illness affect me? Because I think we're all individual in the way these things affect us. And I wrote about it in The Light. I think having the father, the center of our household, be clearly vulnerable to us, right? Even though he was persistent, defiant, strong, didn't really claim it, never talked about his illness, because I think he was probably trying to project a level of certainty and security that maybe he hadn't come to grips with. So we didn't talk about it a lot, but it was staring us right in our faces. Our father was different, but there was also a sense of vulnerability that you live with that can make you hold back. But at the same time, I think our parents pushed us out at the same time. I don't think they wanted us to think of the world by their limits because I think they were limited from a socioeconomic background. Our parents were working class. They couldn't go to college because they had to make sacrifices. They had to work and earn a living. So their worlds got smaller as a result. And they didn't want that for us.
I think for me, a lot of that is consistent, except I operated from a place of fear. I was fearful. I was fearful of vulnerability. I was fearful of catastrophe happening in the house. I was afraid of fires. I was afraid. I was always afraid. And I think I operated out of fear. So I was successful out of the fear of not being able to provide. And, this is a great question because I've never really addressed it, but I was sitting here
Well, if you
listening.
would journal.
Yeah, there we go. Here we go. I know, John. This is the show, man. This is the show. This is the show. But and from that fear, I think my parents saw that in me, and the pendulum swung back over.
Right.
And I think that while they did push us to do stuff, they were more successful in pushing you to do more than they pushed me because I was reticent. I was the oldest. I was like, I almost didn't go away to college, and it wasn't until my dad sort of was like, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
I'll be okay because he knew I was always worried about him. And when the second part of the question is how do you handle your own self-care? For the longest time I didn't, because I was fearful that I'd find out that I was gonna have some malady. And it wasn't until I started, it's like if we can laugh at it now, but it wasn't until I was in my mid-30s and I started I became a head coach where we had our own sort of team doctor that I was like, I got to start. My wife, Kelly, you got to start getting regular physicals. I mean, I was in my late 30s, early 40s when I started having physicals every year. But now I think having children has made me more cognizant of being intentional about my own health in order to stick around for those guys.
Right. I relate so much to that. I think, when you've had the ceiling cave in on you, you no longer assume structural stability. You're kind of living on fault lines. And that can make it hard to push yourself out into the world. I know that for me, as someone who has sat both in the caregiver's chair and who's right now, going through treatment. I just finished 5 days of chemotherapy right before coming here. I have to actively figure out how to be in relationship with the fear that's there, because it's there. I've tried ignoring it. I've tried compartmentalizing it. And when I do that, I find it looms even bigger. And to acknowledge it, but not let it be in the driver's seat. And I've had to figure out how to allow myself to do things that feel risky, to say yes to the invitation, to make the plan, even if I don't know I'm going to be well enough to do it, to undertake writing a book that takes 2 years and you don't know if you're going to be able to see it through, to prioritize, time with friends and family. And so I think, for me, one thing I think of a lot is in periods when I've been at my sickest and I've had maybe only 2 or 3 good hours in a day, it's been a very specific kind of clarifying exercise, in that when you only have 2 or 3 good hours, you get really clear about what you want to do in those 2 to 3 hours, who you want to spend it with, and what's important to you. And right now, I'm feeling good. I have lots of energy. But in the morning, sometimes I'll think to myself, if there are only 2 or 3 things I could do today, forget my to-do list, what is it that would make this day a really good day? And the other thing I do, as someone who loves a to-do list like you, I love a list. I'm the person who, at the end of the day, I'll add things to my to-do list that I've already done just so that I can cross them off and feel that sense of satisfaction. I start with, in my journal, I'll start with a to-feel list before I get to my to-do list. And it's just like, whatever it is, I want to feel rested today. And then I write a couple of ideas of how to get myself there. And I actually make whatever that self-care is part of the list. And it's attached to the feeling that it produces, not to the, I have to go to the gym or whatever it is that's going to make me groan and want to avoid it. I'm more likely to get myself there.
Wow. I love that.
Yes, as a caregiver, that's important as well.
Mm-hmm.
Caregiving can make you feel the need to, I'm just going to power through.
Yeah.
But your body keeps the score. So you know that, well, after a certain point, you realize I have to do something to maintain this role. And you have to make it be something that you're motivated to do. So finding those emotions, and not just emotions, but the practice of self-care, as same with the craft of making music. I find that there's a practice to self-care. You gotta go in the woodshed, as we say, musicians. You gotta learn what's the techniques, and it's very much a shift in perspective.
Yeah.
That you don't have to martyr yourself in service of those you love.
Yeah.
In fact, that's a disservice to those you love. It's the internal world. What's it feel like in there? Do we need to renovate? Do we need to, maybe we need to.
Is there a whole bunch of water coming in your window?
Maybe so. It might be a little leak. Gotta patch that up.
Well, I know I did learn that from watching my parents martyr themselves on both sides, mom and dad. I did work. I think I have worked hard as an adult to find that balance, if only to show my daughters a different balance. Because if I want them to change, I can't show up like my mom, who it's like I'm taking care of everybody and I put myself fifth on my priority list.
Yeah.
People are okay. They can do without you.
Yes.
They can.
And sometimes the best way to care for someone is to model care by caring for yourself. I think about that all the time with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not selfish or indulgent to take a moment for yourself. It's actually a way of giving permission to the other people in your radius to do the same thing for themselves.
John, how are you taking care of yourself these days?
And what's on your
I
to-feel list?
My to-feel list? What's on my to-feel? I'm in a vibe. I want to feel vibey and free. A lot of times we have self-imposed pressure to respond. And that could mean anything. I mean, just to respond, to act, versus to just take a pause and sit with something. Even if everything is telling you this has to happen now, everything is, in fact, totally fine. So I'm in a very deep, on a cellular level, I've gotten to a place of fortitude in the chaos and comfort in taking the time, exactly the time it needs for me to show up as the best version of myself.
Yeah.
And everything else,
I like that.
it continues to run, believe it or not.
Feeling the vibe.
Well, that's a perfect vibe to end on.
Yes,
I really
yes.
appreciate you guys being here.
Man,
It's been fantastic discussion, and
Thank you for
Thank you
making
so
the
much.
time for this.
really means a lot.
I love you guys. I
We love you
really,
both.
really do.
Yeah, we're grateful to have you in our lives, and just to have this beautiful opportunity to have conversation celebrate your great work, my love.
Yes,
Thank
so proud
you.
of you as always.
It's such an honor for us to get to have this kind of a conversation. It's really such a gift.
The honor is ours.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
everyone, the Book of Alchemy, plus your journal, and I'm getting mine, and I'm going to challenge myself to start a new journal series for myself. So thank you. Thank you
She's
for bringing
gonna
this.
bully me into
I am
doing the
definitely
same.
gonna-
So
All you
Yeah,
have to
I
do
think-
is your lists.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I like the lists.
Yeah.
Thank
well,
you.
maybe you're
Thank you.
doing a to feel list for you because I want
To
to
fill
know what
us
you're
and to-do
feeling.
lists.
Hey,
It's like, what's on your
I
to
feel like
list?
you leaving me alone.
just keep it vibing.
Keep it by.
Keep it vibing.
Yeah.
Oh Lord.